So after the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, it looks like that if there is going to be a second trilogy for Spider-Man, which it looks like there will be, that it will look very different compared to what we've seen so far. So I'm going to kind of speculate as to what we could potentially see from the next trilogy from our MCU Spider-Man. This will contain spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. So if you have not seen Spider-Man No Way Home yet, do not watch this video unless you want to be spoiled. So if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content, but spoiler warning for Spider-Man No Way Home. So at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, it ends in honestly probably one of the best ways I could have possibly imagining it to end. So the minds are wiped of everybody basically everybody period, that knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man. So nobody knows Peter Parker even exists now. They just know that Spider-Man exists, but nobody knows who Peter Parker is whatsoever. So obviously the movie ends with Peter being kind of in a grimy apartment in New York, and he has a new suit, which by the way, the new suit is like 10 out of 10 for me. It's super classic, super classic Spider-Man suit that he made himself with a sewing machine and shit. But he ends in the grimy New York apartment, just kind of swinging, listening to a police scanner, doing his own thing, whatever, right? So probably most of you noticed this as well if you're familiar with the old trilogies and stuff, that this was very reminiscent of Tobey Maguire's trilogy, the way this ended. And I don't think it was accidental, right? I think that was very purposefully done this way. And one of the reasons why is I think the next trilogy of movies that we will see out of the MCU Spider-Man will feel very reminiscent of the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield movies. And when I say very reminiscent, I mean in the respect that, like, in those movies, Spider-Man legitimately was on his own. He had to figure out things on his own. He couldn't really get help from anybody, at least not like superhero pals or anything like that, right? And I mean, that's even established in Spider-Man No Way Home when Tobey and Andrew, they talk about how they were just, working by themselves the whole time. They never worked. The Avengers don't exist in their universes. They never worked on a team, while our MCU Tom Holland Spider-Man has. But now it looks like we're going back to the roots of Spider-Man working by himself and such like that. So honestly, I think in the next trilogy of movies, we're probably not even going to really get other superheroes in it besides like small cameos, maybe a cameo from Daredevil, some smaller New York on the ground superheroes. But I don't think there's going to be like super big cameos. Like, I don't think we're going to see a Nick Fury cameo again. I don't think we're going to see, like a new Captain America, Sam Wilson Captain America, cameo, anything like that. I think it's only going to be small superheroes. So I'm honestly excited to see that type of tone set for the next MCU trilogy, because obviously the Tobey Maguire and the Andrew Garfield movies were really good. I mean, Amazing Spider-Man 2 people don't like, but I personally still like that movie too. I like all of the movies. So it is exciting to see Spider-Man go back to his roots in that regard. Now, as far as villains go, right, what can we expect from villains? So I think we can expect multiple different things, right? I mean, first of all, the Spider-Man No Way Home post-credit scene established that part of the symbiote was left behind from Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. So we know that Venom will exist in the MCU now. So there's obviously Venom, which not only did they tease Venom, but there's no way that we're not going to see MCU Tom Holland, Peter Parker go up against Venom at some point. There's just no way. So we could potentially see a Venom storyline. The second person I would say is probably the Scorpion, because the Scorpion has already been teased to exist in the MCU because he was kind of like a smaller time criminal thug in Homecoming, but then they teased him even more in the post-credit scene for Homecoming, where they said that they knew the Vulture knew Spider-Man's identity, and he had like the tattoo of the Scorpion on his neck. So there's the Scorpion, right? That's the second one. The third one I would say is Kraven the Hunter, right? Because Kraven the Hunter is, along with Scorpion, is someone that we haven't seen in live-action movies go up against a Spider-Man yet, right? And then we also know that they were talking about developing a Kraven the Hunt movie over at Sony. And actually, I think it's Aaron Taylor Johnson, the same actor who plays Quicksilver, will be playing Kraven, I believe. Now, the only thing about this is I was under the impression that the Kraven the Hunter movie was going to obviously be in the Sonyverse, so like the Morbius Venom universe, and therefore it wouldn't have any connections to our MCU Spider-Man. So now, do I think that they would do a Kraven the Hunter movie while simultaneously having Kraven the Hunter be a villain in like the new MCU Spider-Man trilogy? I'm not entirely sure they would do that. It's a little different with Venom because Venom has already been established in his own universe and stuff. We have 2 movies for Venom. So if Venom shows up in a different aspect in the MCU against Spider-Man, I just think it'll be a little bit different. But the Kraven the Hunter movie and Kraven the Hunter as a villain, I feel like would show up almost borderline simultaneously, when those movies would release next to each other, basically around the same time frame. So I think that would just be a little bit too confusing. So I don't know if they would do it in that sense. And I mean, we could keep on going on with a bunch of different villains, right? We could see Mysterio again, because I'm still on Team Mysterio's not dead, but I digress on that. But we could see potentially Mysterio again. We could see the Lizard, Kirk Connors. We could see Hobgoblin, because there were, I guess, a bunch of rumors beforehand that Ned was going to potentially become the Hobgoblin, which, speaking of Ned as well, right? Ned is kind of a weird one, because I didn't even realize this originally, but Ned was talking about how before his grandmother or mother was talking about how magic runs in his family, and he was able to use the sling ring. Now, obviously, the use of the sling ring I thought was just, kind of comedic, and it wasn't necessarily in your face about hinting that he could use magic. But if you take into account that he said that his grandmother had like magic ran in his family, and he's able to use the sling ring like that, and then they had like kind of ancient type of daggers, like almost like a family type set on the wall in his home, and then in the final battle it shows him with the Doctor Strange cape on to save him from falling. There was just a lot of imagery to kind of tease Ned's potential at becoming a sorcerer of some kind. I don't know what that would look like, honestly, but it's just kind of interesting to think about. But there were rumors beforehand that he could potentially become the Hobgoblin, so we'll see about that. Then, we got the Rhino. I mean, technically, we've seen the Rhino in live action in the Andrew Garfield movies at the very end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but we didn't actually see them, go toe-to-toe or fight or anything, right? So they could definitely still do the Rhino. I mean, even in that regard, I already said the Lizard, so they can repeat different things, especially since they're going to repeat Venom. They could potentially repeat Sandman. They could repeat Doc Ock with a different actor. I don't think they're going to repeat the Green Goblin, because especially with the Green Goblin being the main villain of No Way Home, and with Willem Dafoe's performance, it was just too spot on. I don't think they're going to repeat the Green Goblin, honestly. But I honestly digress with all that. I think Venom, Kraven, and Scorpion are the top candidates right now that we'll see in the next trilogy. But something about the next trilogy as well that I think they're going to do is I think they're easily going to establish Miles Morales as Spider-Man in the MCU. Now, Miles Morales technically already exists in the MCU because the Prowler, his uncle, was in Homecoming, and he talks about having a nephew in the neighborhood, which would be Miles. So Miles Morales already exists in the MCU, but especially from the time that Homecoming took place, especially if Miles didn't blip during the 5 years, then he would definitely be old enough to start, doing Spider-Man things and stuff like that. So I think this next trilogy will easily set up Miles Morales as Spider-Man, and potentially, let's say they introduce Miles in the next movie, he gets bit by the spider. The next movie after that is Peter kind of teaching him how to be Spider-Man, and then the third movie after that would end the trilogy would be like a big team-up movie between Peter and Miles, potentially ending with Peter dying or something like that, so that Miles Morales can take over for the Spider-Man in the MCU. I can definitely easily see them going that route, but I kind of digress on that. Comment down below if you think that Miles Morales is going to show up sooner rather than later. I think he will. And comment down below what you think the next trilogy of Spider-Man movies might look like. But I appreciate you for watching the video.